Today we have a very special guest, former UNC basketball walk-on, now author, Jackson Watkins. Jackson, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks a bunch for having me. Excited for the conversation.
Now, listen, I have to tell you, and I told you a little bit before, we came on the air. I'm thrilled and pumped to read this book. And you're journeying basically your time as a walk-on and going through your challenges, your lessons learned, and everything combined, plus the fact that you were on a pretty good UNC basketball team.
Yeah, definitely. There were a lot of sort of ups and downs along the way, both, once I made varsity, but also just getting there. My basketball journey was not straightforward in any respect. And I think that's part of why I wrote this book was just, it seems sort of simple on the surface, but, getting to the walk-on position, getting to the end of the bench was, a journey in itself. And then obviously once I made the team, my first year was our national championship run, which included a lot of ups and downs, but also some really memorable moments such as beating, Duke twice and getting all the way to the national championship. So that was sort of the impetus of writing the book. I thought it was sort of a twofold journey, one of becoming a walk-on and then, making the national championship run.
Now, how does that process of saying, hey, I want to write a book, how did that come into play? Was that something that maybe right after the journey you thought, this might be a great story to tell? Or did this kind of happen as, we get farther away from that time?
Yeah, I've always been a big reader. When I was a kid, I loved reading. It gets a little bit harder when your time dries up, but I think it's always been in the back of my mind to create something and create a book it's always been on my bucket list. And once I made the team, I thought, it'd be a cool sort of reflection piece to start writing about how I made it and such. And I actually, looking back on it, I'm pretty grateful that I wrote down a lot of what I was thinking, a lot of the small moments in a journal. I tried to journal as much as I could because I knew it was such a once in a lifetime experience and something that I would look back on pretty fondly. So that really helps throughout the writing process. But I think getting to the Final Four, getting to the national championship, that's when I was like, okay, this could sort of be the grounds for a book, if I am going to write it. And it was always in the back of my mind. And then once I graduated, I was like, I think there's no better time than now to start putting this on paper.
Now, you're one of the most iconic walk-ons in UNC basketball history. Let me tell you, because when you give the crowd biscuits on multiple occasions, especially one against State, I think that holds a little bit higher in regards to, that legacy. So you do have that under your belt. But take me through how that comes into play as a walk-on, because as a high school athlete, you had opportunities to play elsewhere. Why did you choose to go this route, going through North Carolina as a JV player and then part of the varsity team?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it was me sort of chasing this childhood dream of playing at Carolina. My mom went to UNC. We have extended family members who went, and I always grew up a diehard Tar Heel. And as my high school career sort of progressed, I was obviously not getting recruited by any Division I schools, especially not UNC. I was much more recruited at the Division III level, so I had a bunch of sort of NESCAC, small, high academic type of schools talking to me, and that was an exciting opportunity because I love basketball. It was what I was chasing was playing at the next level in high school, and that was obviously a great opportunity to play. But at the same time, I didn't want to sacrifice anything on the academic side, like going to a small school that maybe wouldn't challenge me as much in the classroom or, set me up for a future career down the line. So that was sort of the reasoning behind why I wanted to, put aside sort of the Division III route and go to a big university like a UNC or a UVA, and, chase an against all odds type of walk-on spot. In terms of UNC specifically, like I said, I grew up a diehard, so I was always watching the end of the bench. I knew the guys who were walk-ons. I knew that a lot of them tended to start on the JV team, play a couple of years, and then get pulled up. So that was definitely on my mind when I came to UNC, and pretty quickly after, the first few weeks of my freshman year, it became my goal to try out for the JV team, and, in hopes that would eventually lead to a walk-on spot.
Now, as a diehard Tar Heel fan, when you join the varsity team and you run out of that tunnel at the Smith Center, what is that feeling like?
It was like no other. It felt pretty surreal. And I remember there's a moment in the book where I sort of describe that feeling, but I remember being in the locker room, 90 minutes before the game. And I saw my jersey, lying there in my locker, and I remember unrolling it, and I was sort of in shock just seeing, not just my name on the back, but North Carolina on the front. And then running out of that tunnel was a thrill like no other. I mean, I think the first time was like for an exhibition game against Elizabeth City State or something like that. So by no means was it a packed stadium, but I mean, the Dean Dome's iconic. I grew up, dreaming of playing on the floor, running out of the tunnel. And I think running out to the crowd roaring and the band playing, like that was just it was sort of like a movie moment in my life.
You came to Carolina on the varsity roster at a very weird time in Carolina basketball history. And by weird, I mean Roy Williams leaving, retiring, Hubert Davis taking over. And let's remember, you and I both know, and Tar Heel fans will too, the season wasn't at all, successes. There was a lot of struggles along the way. You guys went from being a team that was a borderline NCAA tournament team to making this magical run that nobody expected. When did you notice, if there was any point where the tide kind of shifted to say, we're a lot better than our record indicates, at the current moment? Maybe it was midway through the season, the Duke game. Was there that moment that you really thought, hey, this team can make a run?
Yeah, I mean, to your first point, I think it was a time of change, not just in my own basketball story of like, going from a regular student to being a walk-on. Like that was a huge shift. But to your point, like Coach Williams retires on April 1st. Everybody thinks it's a cruel joke. But I mean, those are some huge shoes to fill. He's one of the greatest of all time. So I think having Coach Davis coming in, it was a continuation, obviously, like he's born and bred a Tar Heel. But I mean, I think a lot of questions were sort of in the air. As to your second point, I personally thought that we had the ability to go on a run the entire year. I think we started like 4-0 my junior year. I mean, playing some like sort of easy non-conference games at first, and I was like, "We're going undefeated." maybe I was naive in my first college season. Maybe I'm an optimistic guy, so like maybe that's just how I thought about things. But I really thought we had the talent to make a run. I mean, if you look at that starting five with RJ and Caleb, Leaky, Mondo, and I mean, at first it was Dawson, but then it was Brady, obviously the legend. I mean, that's a super talented squad. Those guys are all professionals now. So I always thought we had the talent. Obviously, throughout the season, we saw, some pretty low points, but also some pretty high points where we sort of saw flashes of our potential. But I think, honestly, the run really started in that last game at Cameron, because that's when we really, got some momentum, captured lightning in a bottle, and it felt like chemistry was just clicking on all fronts.
Let's go to Cameron for a minute. Take us through the feeling and the emotion of going into that packed stadium with all the alumni and all the fans and everybody all super hyped about this Coach K game, and then being able to spoil it. Like, as a visiting player, what is that atmosphere like?
It's hard to describe, and I try and do an okay job of describing it in the book, but honestly, I don't know if it'll do it justice. But I mean, I think there was this feeling among the team of like sort of pure confidence going in there. Like, it was not lost upon anybody that we had gotten our butts handed to us about a month earlier at home. They beat us by 20. It felt like 40. So like that was fresh on everybody's mind. But at the same time, it felt like all the attention in America was on Duke, on Coach K's last home game. Like you said, there were, I think, 100 former players flown in behind the bench. And it just felt like it was us against the world. I think that was sort of the prevailing sentiment. I think they were number 4 in the country, obviously stacked with NBA talent. But I think that ultimately played to our advantage. Like, I don't think they were necessarily ready to play us. And I think that showed on the first play where Caleb drives, dishes it to Mondo for a huge slam. And basically from that moment onward, I think it was clear that we were in for a dogfight of a game. But I think the gravity of the situation hit me when we drove up to the stadium, because usually in a stadium, you drive the bus like into the back tunnel or something, and then you get off and go to the locker room. But Cameron, just given it's old and small, you have to drive up to this cul-de-sac. And, even as a team, you're walking into the stadium like almost through a side door. And as we get up, it's like a Saturday evening, the bus like rolls into the cul-de-sac, and there are thousands of Duke fans waiting for the bus. And it is like, I remember like usually we're all like wearing headphones and stuff, and we all like swiveled our heads to look out the window. We're like, oh my gosh, like this is really happening. And then as soon as we get off the bus, we're like, it's maybe like 8 feet wide, like almost like a tunnel, and people are booing and yelling crazy things. And that was a pretty epic walk. Even it was like 100 yards, but it was a pretty epic moment. But at that point, I think we were like, let's go in here and shock the world.
Now, after you shocked the world, you got another chance at Duke in the Final Four. And we all know how that one ended. You guys retired Coach K, not once, but twice. Going into that game, did you feel there was a different mindset with the team? I know you said that you guys felt confident going into the season finale in Cameron, but what was the feeling like going into that Final Four matchup?
Yeah, it was different for sure. I mean, I think the first matchup, or the matchup in Cameron Indoor, that was like sort of like blind confidence. Like, we were going to give it everything we had and hope for the best. After we beat them, now it's 1-1 in the series on the year. We know we're capable of beating them, obviously, but then there's this pressure of like, okay, we have a full week to prepare for them. It's the Final Four. It's the first meeting ever between UNC and Duke in the tournament. It's Coach K's last potential game. Coach Davis's first. Like, there were all these different storylines that were just colliding in epic proportion. So it did feel different. I'd say we were similarly confident. Like, that's how we approach every game. We know that we're going to win coming in. But the consequences felt a little bit different. It felt sort of like the world might end either way, just given what was at stake for the rivalry.
Yeah, for sure. And then, of course, we know how that one ended. You go to the finals against Kansas. We know Armando Bacot rolled his ankle, really was hobbled. 15-point lead at the half. Go into the locker room. What's the mindset there? And then how did that quickly change, in your opinion, come the second half?
Yeah, it's always tough to hear that one. And like, if it still feels every week, I have a moment where I'm like, damn, we should have won that game. I think everybody was trying to have the mindset of like, it's 0-0. I mean, that's the right mindset you should have at halftime, I think, regardless of where you stand, but especially with a large lead like that. And I mean, clearly Kansas was super talented that year. They had NBA talent on their team, super well coached. I mean, they were 1 seed. They had sort of marched their way through their opponents. So obviously a very capable team of going on runs, and basketball is a game of runs. And I think we just ran out of gas, it seemed like, as soon as the second half started. It was just tough. I mean, especially going from basically the highest of highs for not just that Saturday night against Duke, but the whole month had sort of been just a month of celebration and joy, to go to this lowest of low, 20 minutes later. It was tough. And I think Coach Sean May put it into perspective in the locker room. It was a quiet locker room. Heads were down. Guys were crying. I was crying. He said, this is going to teach us all something. It might not be obvious yet, but I think it'll teach us something. And that's sort of something that I've tried to take with me, since that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned before, and you called him a legend, and I think that's the perfect word to describe Brady Manick. He comes in as a transfer from Oklahoma and starts the year as a reserve, and really nobody knew what to expect from him. But then not only did he become arguably the most valuable player on the roster, but he became such a likable presence in Carolina, and you could tell from the fan base really drew into what he was bringing to the table each and every night in a locker room. Just give us a description of what Brady Manick brings to the table.
He is one of a kind. I love him. I love him. It's funny because the summer that he transferred in, I wasn't on the team yet, obviously. And I remember seeing it on social media that he was transferring in. And I was like, who is this guy from Oklahoma, like with red hair and a beard? And I was like, all right. But sort of as soon as I made the team, I was like, okay, not only is this guy a sniper from three and also just savvy, like in the mid post, but he's a great guy and he's super comfortable in his own skin. And, he's going to do what he's going to do. And I think that's a great, part of who he is. But yeah, I mean, to start the year, he was coming off the bench, which in hindsight looks pretty crazy, but he'd sort of have some streaky games where he'd hit a few and then he wouldn't play, as much the next. But then I think as soon as Dawson left the team and then Brady stepped into the starting lineup, it became clear that not just him, but any of our starting five could go off for 20 in any given night, if not multiple guys going off for 20. But I think having him on that in that March Madness run was awesome. I mean, he spent a lot of times with the walk-ons. We, would make funny TikTok videos that went viral. And I think part of it is that he's such like an iconic looking person. Like there's not many 6'9" ginger hoopers with big beards who can like score 20 on your favorite team. So I think that's sort of what went viral, I'd say, especially in the tournament run where he had like, that huge game against Baylor and then obviously Duke. So I think he was a great guy and a great basketball player, but an even better guy.
Now, it felt like during that tournament run, it was really Brady and the Biscuit Boys. You kind of felt like a boy band. Who was responsible for coming up with these TikToks? Because let me tell you, I went back the other day and I was watching them, and they're still iconic.
Yeah, I was in writing the book, I was sort of trying to think about like a nickname for Brady and the walk-ons, and I think somebody had said the Brady Bunch at one point. So I think that could stick. I don't know. But yeah, I think it was Brady who came up with the initial idea because he and Creighton they were always roommates like on road trips. And I remember, I think it was before the tournament or maybe the first round, they posted like a funny one just where like Brady was like in his bed in his like full uniform.
Uniform, yeah.
Yeah. And then I think, Brady would always sit with us at sort of the walk-on table. So we just started mulling over some ideas like, hey, like if we win the next game, like whoever we're playing, like we should just make a dumb TikTok. And yeah, sort of just went from there where we'd film one the night before a game and then, we weren't dumb enough to like post it before the game because then it would look like we were distracted. But, right after the game, Brady would post it. And a lot of times they would just end up going viral, just a lot of due to some of the reasons I mentioned, just like, the grad transfer, starting five, savior of our season with the walk-ons who don't play. So I think it was that interesting dynamic.
A lot of people get mixed up with Brady because when you look at the commitment picture that was originally posted on social media, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but he, like you described, has the full beard, and your first initial reaction is could this guy play basketball? Especially if you don't watch Oklahoma basketball at all. But then you start to watch him and you're like, man, this guy's a game changer. And he just was able to stretch the floor for you guys and add that element that, was really needed and, kind of lacked early on. And nothing against Dawson, his situation is whatever the case may be. But, when Brady kind of fell into that starting rotation, it kind of seemed like you guys took off a bit.
Yeah, and I think his ability to stretch the floor was the biggest thing. Like he's a big pick and pop guy. And at 6'9", he can finish inside, but I think his bread and butter is, picking and popping, knocking down threes. But I think another aspect of his game is cutting. Like, he's a really good cutter. And I think just given how guard heavy our play was, like with RJ and Caleb, who could create pretty easily off the dribble, all eyes tended to go to them as soon as they got into the lane. And that would open up, easy drop off dunks to not just Brady, but also Mondo. So I think the contrast was pretty obvious my senior year when we didn't have Brady. We also didn't have a great cutter. And I think, like, looking back on it, it wasn't just his ability to pick and pop, but it was his cutting ability and ability to know when and where to be pretty much at all times.
Now, you got to go head-to-head with these guys every day in practice. Was there a specific guy or guys that you had to cover, and who was the most difficult to cover, in your opinion?
Yeah, I was always on Caleb or RJ for the most part. I mean, sometimes I'd get switched onto one of the bigs, but usually if that happened, I was desperately looking to switch out with somebody. But it was a lot of time spent guarding RJ and Caleb. Sometimes I'd guard up, like my senior year, to like Tyler Nickel, or once Seth Trimble came in. I mean, he was tough to guard, but RJ's always going to be the toughest guy that that I had to guard. I mean, we're about the same height, I'd say. He is miles quicker than I am, if that was not obvious. But he's so shifty. Like, Caleb's hard to guard because he's physical. He's got a few inches on me, and he's a shot maker. Like, he can make tough shots, but I can sometimes try and guess where he's going and guess correctly. I am in no man's land with RJ. Like, I don't know whether to press up and take away the three, but if I try and guess where he's going, I'm going to end up on my ass, like on the floor. But there were a few times where I got dropped by RJ, but we're tight. So I think just the battles every day was, it does nothing but bond teammates. So. Yeah.
Now, the two guys that you talked about a little bit, Armando and RJ, looking back at what they were able to accomplish, during their Carolina careers, they both left historic, figures in the program. RJ's going to have his number up in the rafters very soon. Armando, in my opinion, should as well. What's your take on what the two of them did in the program for the 5 years that they both spent at Carolina?
It was incredible. I mean, those guys are legends. I use the word for Brady, but I played with a bunch of legends, and I'm not afraid to say it. And actually, in the last sort of epilogue of the book, I sort of list out a lot of their accomplishments, just because I think if you're not a Carolina fan, like, I think it's important to not just understand the moments throughout the year that I sort of talk about, but also just understand from a historical aspect, these guys broke a lot of records. And I think especially seeing RJ win ACC Player of the Year, after I left, and then also seeing Caleb win, I guess, Pac-12 Player of the Year the following year, that was really cool, just to be able to say that I played with two conference players of the year, which is super impressive. Arguably, Mondo should have won Player of the Year my junior year too, but I mean, just seeing the scoring numbers that they put up for Mondo, the double doubles and the rebounds, like, it's hard to look back on like a team that collectively set that many sort of records. And there was one moment where I think it was my senior year, and we're getting ready for a game, and usually we like do some warm ups in the back and then get our ankles taped. And I walk in, and Mondo's on the training table, like waiting to get his ankles taped, and he's just like, "Hey, J Watt," that was one of my nicknames on the team. He's like, "Hey, J Watt, I'm the only person in the world to have scored 6 double doubles in an NCAA tournament." And I was like, "No, but now I know now." So I think that was cool. Like, I know he was informing me, but also when I was like writing the book, I sort of went and dove a little bit deeper on his double numbers, and they're incredible. And I think it's cool, like, seeing Caleb Wilson now, like, on a similar pace, but Mondo doing that in 5 years and RJ doing that in 5 years, Caleb playing 5 years. It's pretty incredible once it all comes together.
And of course, when, those guys did something great on the court, the main attraction was on the sideline with the Biscuit Boys and the celebrations. How do those come about? Is that, do you have meetings for that? Do you guys, practice those? Like, what goes through that process?
It's funny. It's a work of art, I would say. There are some strategized celebrations, at dinner when we're eating our pregame meal or whatnot, we'll sit together and talk about, if there are any celebrations that we should do. But usually we end up forgetting everything that we talked about once the game actually starts. But I'd say there were a few like where we were coordinated, where like one was we'd all like after a three, we'd like bring out a weapon of choice by like an RPG or like finger guns or something like that. But then there were some where we just like went nuts after like a big dunk. It's like all you want to do is jump in the air and scream and point that dude just got dunked on. So there was one moment where Dewey Ferris ended up like in a T pose, like laying on the ground in front of the bench, like some random stuff like that. But I think we all, we took pride in bringing that type of energy and excitement to the game. And I think like, especially at home, that could really help get the crowd into it and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, during the game, our job is to pump up our teammates, encourage them, keep the crowd involved after preparing them in practice. So like we contribute in practice, but then once it gets to the game, it's like, let's just keep the vibes as high as possible. So that was our job and we loved it.
Well, you forgot to mention one of your jobs, and one of your jobs is coming in and securing biscuits for the crowd. And you had two of these magical moments. And let me just ask, how much pressure goes into those type of moments for you when, there's biscuits on the line and 20,000 people are cheering, waiting for those biscuit coupons to come out?
Yeah, I wouldn't say pressure. I think like the adrenaline sort of washes every other emotion away for the most part. But honestly, the free throw against NC State for Biscuits, like there were a lot of other storylines that contributed to the nerves, in addition to Biscuits. Like for me, I hadn't scored yet. So like I had not put the ball in the basket. So like that was some pressure. Obviously it was a rivalry game, even though we were like beating them pretty handily. There's always like a packed stadium for those games. So there were a ton of people, but the biggest one, like Biscuits were like in the back of my mind. Let me just say that, because the biggest one was that Michael Jordan was at the scorer's table watching me shoot free throws. And that's like pretty much all I was thinking about when I was walking to the free throw line. And if it wasn't obvious that I was nervous in that moment, I think it should have been obvious once I bricked the first free throw, because it was nowhere near going in. And I sort of knew that. I was like, my legs are shaking, everything's shaking, like I'm going to miss this one. But after I got that miss out, I sort of calmed down and made the second one. So there were definitely a lot of nerves. It wasn't just Biscuits, but then my shot against Citadel, that was sort of just like I don't know. That was sort of like a in the moment type of instinct takes over. Like we needed 5 points and it was sort of against all odds because there were 30 seconds left. We hadn't scored a point yet. And then Creighton hits that 2 and then they shoot a quick shot and suddenly we have 10 seconds left with the rebound. And then we're just pushing, trying to create something. And then I was sort of just like, let's do this. I'm either going to take the shot and make it or miss. Like might as well just try for the best. Yeah.
Is that at that point, is Hubert Davis yelling, hold the ball, run the clock out, or is he letting you go?
I didn't care to look, honestly. It was an ask for forgiveness type of moment, I'd say, than ask for permission. And earlier in the year, that exhibition game I was talking about, like my first time on the court, we were beating them by 40 or something. And I held the ball with about 10 seconds to go because I thought, we were dribbling the clock out, and I looked to the sideline and Coach Davis is like doing this with his finger, which means like play, and everybody else is doing it. The whole stadium's yelling at us to do something. And so I like go into this move and lose the ball. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm never holding the ball again. So then once I got in that situation, I was like, we're going to make something happen. And actually after that exhibition game, once we got into the locker room, like Creighton was yelling at me, like, I'm never passing you the ball again. And Mondo was like, if y'all go in, like, y'all just got to go get a bucket, like, no matter what the score is. So I was like, okay, that is my sign. Like, now I understand that we're going in to get a bucket. But, yeah, it worked out.
once you get the stamp of approval from Armando, I think that's the green light right there,
Yeah.
But the art of walk-ons is changing, and I know you talk about it in the book as well. What's your thoughts on how it's changed in such a quick, you know, time period since you've been on campus? It's only been a couple of years, but the landscape of college athletics has changed so drastically over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it was really cool to have sort of a first person experience of that changing environment. Like my first year was the first year of NIL. So we would do, autograph signings and events and stuff like that. But it was sort of at this turning of the tides where now guys were starting to get paid a lot of money just to play. And also the transfer portal era was just beginning. So, coaches and teams were relying more on the transfer portal rather than, senior high school recruiting classes. So I think getting to see the first year or two of that sort of shift was pretty cool. But also I'm pretty grateful for being at Carolina during that time because, I think this is the first year that the NCAA is instilling sort of roster caps. So now rosters are capped at 15 and, looking back on our roster of, I think 17 my junior year, I wouldn't have been on the team looking back on it. So I sort of hit that sweet spot right before sort of the drastic shift, especially when it comes to walk-ons. And now they're giving more scholarships. So the scholarship limit has been increased from 13 to 15. So the traditional sort of non-scholarship walk-on is dwindling, I think, which is pretty unfortunate just given, I grew up always watching the end of the bench, knowing where those guys were, knowing what their basketball journeys look like. So I think it's sort of sad to sort of see that go away. Maybe it comes back. I hope. But I think there are a lot of cool stories similar to mine and similar to my walk-on teammates who aren't going to have the same opportunity. So I think it's tough.
Yeah, for sure. And when somebody picks up the book, when it's available, what do you want them to take from the book? Is there a specific theme or idea or storyline that you want them to really understand when they go through and they read about your journey?
Yeah, the main message, and this is the title of the book, Dream On, is to really just keep dreaming and chasing your dreams, whatever it may look like. If it's basketball, great. If it's a job, great. If it's facing a certain application to a school, great. If it's, raising your kids the right way, that can be your dream. I think I want people to not be afraid to dream as big as possible because when I was a kid in high school, it did not look very likely that I was going to end up playing basketball at UNC, let alone, having the journey that I had. So I think that's the main message. And I try and tell that in a lot of different ways, whether it's talking about my childhood, how I sort of viewed different opportunities and, always chased North Carolina, whether it's enjoying every step of the journey, whether it's a win, a loss, a setback, a success, every step of the journey is important too, not just the outcome. But I think at the end of the day, the people that you're with are also super important. And no matter if you achieve that dream or not, you're always going to look back on the people and the memories probably with the most fond light. So that's the main message.
Now, so for those interested in purchasing the book, where could they go to buy it? And of course, we're going to share the link, but from your words, where could they go to buy it?
Yeah, so currently I actually have a sample copy right here. Currently you can go pre-order on the Dream On Shopify link that I can share with you. And this is the first few days of January, but later in the month, maybe mid to late January, it will be available for purchase directly from Amazon.
And we will definitely share those links for you. And we wish you the best of luck as Dream On hits the shelves in Amazon. And of course, thank you, Jackson, for taking some time to talk to us today about this endeavor and your journey at Carolina. It's a story that I think a lot of people will enjoy to hear. And it's a refreshing, storyline to keep pursuing your dreams, however, impossible they may seem.
Yeah. Well, thanks a bunch for having me. This was great. Always glad to talk about it. And the last thing I'd say is like everybody has a story. You just got to tell it. So that was a big piece of the inspiration that I had. So hopefully people enjoy it once it comes out.
Absolutely. And again, Dream On, hitting stores now. Find the link in our little bio below and make sure you grab your copy today.